And here's our next car, a 1957 Mercedes 220s Coupe, restored by Rudi Koniczek in Victoria. So he made a tremendous name for himself with restoring Gullwings, and this is one of the cars that he did recently. So we'll catch up with the audio here. Too soon, you wind up with sanding marks because the layer of primer and filler evaporates after you paint it, and it leaves these marks. Well, it was Rudi that said he keeps the cars for 6 months in primer to make sure that everything's completely evaporated. Then it gets the final sand, and then it gets paint, which is why when you look at one of Rudi, or Mike, I should actually say Mike's cars, because Mike from Coachworks did the painting, and that's why when you look at the cars and you look at them in all the light, you don't see any sanding marks. But you can imagine that if you have a car and you got to park it for 6 months to let it dry, that's not very convenient for the buyer or the restorer. Okay, so but that's one of the measures that you need to take your time, do it carefully, and so on to get that result. Okay, and that's also why you'll have to pay Rudi or Paul Russell or any of the restorers in that league, $300,000 or $400,000 to restore a car, because they do the best work. There's a lineup of people who want the best, and if you want it, you got to pay. All right, so there's a big difference in the interiors between the 220s and the lesser versions of the cars. The 180 and the 219, etc., are quite plain. We see there's a newspaper article about Rudi Koniczek. The leather is beautifully done. You can tell it's new. Some of these cars still have some of their original leather, which has a patina that's irreplaceable. But the wood, the dash, the chrome, all that stuff is at a really high level. So what's this car worth? Well, you're not going to go wrong with it. It's a beautiful car. Oh, the thing I like the best is it's got this 4-speed on the tree. So you sit very upright in the car, and your driving position is close to this big white steering wheel, and then you've got the 4 on the tree, and a very smooth 6-cylinder engine. It's quiet. It's very dignified in the way it goes about its business. It's not fast, but it's smooth. It keeps up with traffic, there's absolutely no reason to try to go fast in this car, and it's just fun to cruise around, and using the gearbox on the tree is actually really quite fun. Anyway, it's just a lovely machine. What's it worth? Okay, well, if you gave it, you could buy a car like this as a project for $10,000 or $20,000. You'd give it to Rudi Koniczek is retired now, but the base, or the team that he created, is still in business, and you'd probably have to pay them. I'm guessing it's in Canada. I'm guessing 250,000 Canadian dollars. Whatever that is, 180,000 US to do this car. Okay, so recreating this car. There's probably very few in this condition. It's not an injected car. I don't know how many of the coupes they made that were injected. I should check all those facts. So the replacement cost on it's going to be, call it $250. The upper end of this market for normal 220s that aren't convertibles is probably only $80,000 or $90,000 US. It's kind of a crazy thing. I'll applaud the guy who did it, because people who restore cars or have cars restored like this do so from their heart, and it's not all about what they can get at the auction, and that means they didn't cut any corners, and they preserved a little bit of history and preserved a car that might not ordinarily be done this well. So I've got to hand it to them. I've done that myself with restorations,
you lose a lot of money, but at the end you're just glad you did it because, you know, your heart's in the right place, right? It's easy to play for the winning team. It's easy to jump on the bandwagon. It's easy to buy the cars everybody wants. It's easy to be a hero and flip cars and make a few $1,000s and be a car collector, okay? But the true, real car collectors who really appreciate the historical significance and what the car is and what it brings will always do a good job, and they'll probably always lose money, or most of the time lose money. And these are the guys that you want to have a beer with, okay? Not the loudmouth who's bragging about how they bought a car for so many cents on the dollar and flipped it and made money, and there's all kinds of these guys in Arizona, okay? I think $100,000 and it's really well bought, and somebody should be happy. You know, if you want this exact car, well, you know, you can pay up to $200,000 if you want, because that's the replacement value. And I imagine it's got a healthy reserve on it, so I'd be surprised if this car sells actually. But I would say if I was buying it, $100,000 or maybe a little bit more would be where I would put it. So here's a little bit more on that 220 SE. It's a day later, and we see he's got the information board up, and this article that was on the seat he's made photocopies of, as well as the repair invoices, which you can see, and it does come to 227,000 Canadian dollars. Okay, so that isn't surprising and is about what I mentioned earlier in the video. So we'll see if this thing gets 50 cents on the dollar. We'll see what happens. I mean, it really deserves a lot more than that. But I said it's a small market, so we'll just have to see what happens.